Welcome to the Runes of Ranudar. This is an episodic fantasy fiction currently being published on Royal Road, and there's a link below in the description. I am author H. Morrison Webb, and I will be your narrator on the audiobook experience for this story. An introduction. Swordswoman Shellah Skyfast needs one last good gig before she hopes to retire to her homeland in the Shielings. Little does she know that the client protection job she takes will become the adventure of a lifetime as she is entangled in the search for the ancient Runes of Ranudar. What to expect on this journey? Mature main characters, relics and forgotten magic, adventurous locations and situations, the occasional twist, fantasy, adventure, and nothing terribly grim. And now, let's go to our prologue. The seas hissed. From where the 12 had retreated into the cliff caves of Linos, they couldn't see how the waters below behaved through the thick scrim of fog, or was it steam or ash, but they could hear the waves seethe. Someone had the foresight to stock these caves with amphorae of water and preserves, bedding and salves, oil for lamps. Some stood over the shallow puddle where the prophetess Lamatira attempted to scry what remained of the outside world, while others nursed their burns, shivering in the shadows out of sight. He returned to his task, prying with the lip of his dagger the 12 stones from the bronze crown which bound them, 12 stones for 12 disciples. Larinium lies under the waves, said Lamatira, voice dull from the tone of her trance, or perhaps the force of the explosion had muted her hearing. It was as if tiny little bells chimed in his own ears. All else is ash. In the dead fields of Koromo, the slaves burn their masters and hang the priests. The temples have all fallen. Superstitious fools, someone said. Others grumbled in agreement. Can you blame them? Said another voice from the shadows of the cave. We brought this doom upon us all. We set out to break the old temple foundations of our realm, and we did, just not in a manner we could control. Dar was weak, one muttered. He was a fool to think he could harness the power of the god. He looked up from his work on the crown to see who was arguing. As a stone clattered free, everyone turned to stare in his direction. Reddened eyes glittered in ash-blackened faces. He couldn't discern one face from another in the shadows, nor their voices hoarse from smoke. Their true names would not avail them anything besides a noose or a pyre if they survived to return. It was best to forget them. He collected the stray stone. In the flickering light of the oil lamp, the green jewel winked in his hand, but he could feel its power utterly spent, as was his own. No, he corrected, as he set to work on the next stone. Dar was right, but the time was not. We all misread the mountain. Imagine if we had waited a generation, prepared more rigorously, read the signs more clearly, someone added. Now the holy mountain is gone. We'll now need 12 generations or 20 for the mountain to rebuild. This opportunity may never come again, a voice coughed from the shadows. All this work for naught. Not for naught. We will return to our strongholds and rebuild. When the mountain is ready, we will be too. He pulled the last stone from the bronze. Lamatira, behind whose banner will the free peoples rally? The prophetess smeared a streak of ash across her face as she looked up from her scrying pool. There's a tall Laren man who swings a broken shackle from a long chain. They chant, Jonas! From the fields as the old leaders flee before him. The bronze felt cold and heavy in his hands. He's going to need a crown then. An old swordswoman's work is never done, or at least not done enough to retire comfortably on. Shellah Skyfast bent to rub her sore knee for a moment as she walked on the fog-slicked, cobbled streets to the guild hall to see if any new work was posted, feeling every last bit of her 55 years. Spring became wet early this year, making the roads in and out of the seaside town of Northport muddy and slow. Many of the overland caravans requiring guard assistance had already departed across the high fells, but the sea routes should be hiring soon. Pirates and brigands abounded. Even an older mercenary like herself would find a gig, and she hoped that some of her regular sea merchant clients would be returning to Northport. Shellah liked the sea, much less walking. One last season, and she could retire to a small croft back home in the Shieling Isles. Shellah felt a slow ache in her lower back. Riding and horses were fairly terrible too. One last good sea gig. On the northeast shoreline of Coram, the unimaginatively named Northport was the northmost outpost of the kingdom and was the sea connection to the Shielings, the ice peoples of the boreal forests, and any of the sea routes to the south. The high fells formed a tall, rocky spine between Northport and the capital city and were impassable in the later spring when the deep mud and black flies made overland travel unbearable. What Northport lacked in glamour, culture, agriculture, or cuisine, it made up for in robust trade activity. There was always plenty of work, each guild had an active chapter in town, and lodgings were reliably cheap. The Swordsman's Guild resided in a rough-timbered hall with well-worn steps. It never seemed to have quite enough light inside to read the job postings, route maps, and guild best practices such as display no unsheathed long blades in town. The hall smelled of old leather and sword oil. Shellah grabbed a nail and hammer from the bucket and pinned some scraps of parchment on the for-hire wall. Shellah Skyfast, sword for hire, merchant protection services, guild license, references available, seaworthy. Inquire at Cooper's Tavern. Shellah, hey! A familiar voice called. A hand waved from the shadows in the far side of the hall. The sun on the dust motes and lamp smoke made it difficult to see who was over there by the sword's wanted wall. Jonas, is that you? Shellah approached. The Swordsman's Guild was big with members across the kingdoms, but if you worked long enough, you already knew everyone in the merchant protection trade. You're back already? Yeah. Jonas had a weepy half-scab cut across his face, running from his cheekbone into the graying strands of his beard. He was a rugged old soldier with a reputation for being smart and reliable, and was usually always on the road. Bandits on the high fells already. Traders made the decision to turn around once we were attacked, outnumbered. We managed to retreat without getting seriously looted or anyone killed. The king's apparently mustering forces to root them out. Looks like sea work for now. The muster isn't going to want older blades like ours. Yeah, military work is a younger person's game. Sure enough, there was an enlistment poster for mercenary recruits for the royal muster already up on the wall. The king paid good coin, but had an age limit and only hired men. There was nothing for the sea routes yet, or any other jobs for that matter. Just corners of parchment remained where the listings had been hastily torn off the wall. If there was trouble in the high fells, none of the overland merchants would risk it. Shellah sighed and motioned to Jonas's wound. I could help with that. Appreciated. They settled at a nearby table where there was better light. Shellah reached into her belt pouch and drew out a packet of aromatic herbs. She sprinkled some in the palm of her hand, rubbing them into a fine powder before gently dabbing them into his cut. She whispered something softly and a soft scent drifted up from the powder. Done. Even in the half-light of the hall, she could see the redness of the infection beginning to subside. I always forget the Shielings people are witches, Jonas said, rubbing his jaw. Handy, though. Shellah nodded. Witch is a strong word. We've just got the small magics. Cantrips. I can heal a small infection, remove a stain, light a little flame, that kind of thing. When you're from a barren little rock in the middle of the sea, you learn to make do with what you've got. Yeah, my wife tried to keep it clean, but I think some poison got in there. Or dirt. The mud's already terrible. Shellah remembered Jonas had a real home and family in town. The swordsmen typically didn't discuss or disclose much personal information on the road. For some, it was a reminder of being away from loved ones, or for others, the very reason to be away. Each had their own rationale for taking the sword and typically did not share why. There weren't many women in the guild either, and once Shellah had been in the trade for a number of years, people's curiosity about her ceased. She was tall, solidly built, with a stern face that had never been considered particularly pretty. Jonas looked at her curiously. Shell, why are you still in town? You should have been on the road already. Well, I was late returning from the sea routes, she responded. Not one but two big storms damaged the merchant fleet. We got stranded on the Polaric Isles off Laren for a while. Getting repairs took forever, not a lot of good wood there. The merchants had to sell a lot of cargo at a loss. So by the time I ended up back here in port, the early overland routes had already departed. I hope they're getting those ships ready. I don't want to sit out a whole season here at Cooper's. Yeah, Jonas agreed. With the raids now and the King's muster in the fells, I have a feeling any gigs that come in the meantime are going to be weird. Shellah stood. Well, join me at Cooper's for an ale if you ever need a break from the homestead. And keep that cut clean. Jonas laughed. Another scar at this point won't make much of a difference. After taking care of her guild business, Shellah returned to Cooper's Tavern. She kept a small room upstairs which had a pleasant view of the tavern's kitchen garden from its window seat. She dropped her cloak on the one chair and sat on her narrow bed to remove her boots. In a basket nearby were her wool spindle and some knitting. She pulled out a partially completed sock and got comfortable on the window's cushion in the afternoon sun. Shellah was also in the Piecers Guild, which traded in socks, gloves, hats, and other small piecework. It was a good side job for the off-season, even if it did not pay nearly as well as the guard work. There would be plenty of time to knit once she was retired. In the meantime, it paid the bills at Cooper's. Socks didn't require a lot of thought, and with Shellah being a Shieling, her socks would never bunch or cause blisters. Little magics made life better, and such socks commanded a better price from the piecers. After some stitching, the sun went behind the early evening clouds, and it was time to find some supper. Shellah changed into a clean linen shift, pinned on a muted plaid overdress, then rebraided her long bite of graying blonde hair. She slid into her house shoes to head downstairs for dinner and any local news. Her stomach growled. She could smell bread baking and something savory cooking. Cooper's was known for its simple but good food. She took her usual seat by the fire. The barkeep served her customary light ale, and she waited some bread and cheese. "It's been reavers," she overheard from a nearby table. "They're in the high fells and have been seen in the North Seas. The king is going to have a—" "Miss Shellah?" the barkeep interrupted. He waved over a cloaked figure. "This gentleman is asking for you." Shellah motioned for the man to sit. She could see a corner of her guild parchment in his hand. He pulled back his hood to reveal one of those faces which made men unremarkable in most situations after they reached a certain age. He settled into the chair across from her. The barkeep brought him the same ale. "Shellah Skyfast, pleased to meet you." He held out his hand, which appeared strong but smoothed and uncalloused. Shellah took it. "I picked up your information and references from the Swordsman's Hall. I am Torrand Greensman from Coram City." Shellah took a sip of her ale and motioned for him to share her bread and cheese. "Pleased to meet you. And your business, sir?" "My mistress is currently here in Northport and requires traveling companions for her protection. As you have likely heard, the reavers have been seen in the high fells and up north. Her business will take her to the Shielings. We're looking for someone knowledgeable about the Isles." "Interesting time to be traveling to the Shielings," Shellah said. "If her business can wait a few weeks, the main merchant fleet will be back in port and she can sail in more comfort and safety to Dundarlow. It will be their first stop on the summer route. The king's muster will have suppressed any banditry or piracy ahead of the fleet." "Her business to Dundarlow is more urgent," said Greensman, "and she might need to visit another of the Isles as well. We do need someone with local knowledge. I think she would be pleased to have a swordswoman as her protection. She's from Coram City and expects a certain level of decorum." The barkeep brought stewed game hens and spring greens to the table, as well as more of the bread and cheese. He topped off their mugs with his pitcher of ale. Shellah thought of Jonas's comment earlier about weird gigs, and also of her somewhat uninspiring knitting upstairs in her little room. "May I meet your mistress? I'd like to get some more information about her errands in the Shielings to see if I can help with what she's looking to find there, and see if we're compatible." She laughed. "I've been on the road for a long time, and I'm typically merchant security, not a personal bodyguard. Even though I'd like to think I'm respectable, a fine lady of Coram City might not agree." Greensman pushed back his chair and stood. "Of course." He slid her a slip of paper on which Shellah could see a Northport address for an inn much classier than Cooper's. "We might need some additional protection if you know of anyone. Can't be too careful with the reavers. Please meet me there at the second watch bell tomorrow morning." Shellah nodded. "Tomorrow, then. Nice to meet you, Mr. Greensman." "You as well, Miss Skyfast. I look forward to tomorrow. And if you know of another swordsman who is respected and available for hire immediately, please bring them. As our errand is pressing, our coin is very good." Shellah watched Greensman pull his cloak around himself. He had an economy of motion which made her wonder if her potential client already had professional protection. She returned to her meal and listened to the din of the pub around her. Talk of reavers, bandits, trade goods piling up in the warehouses on the wharf. Talk of the merchant fleet being late to port. Talk of the king's muster. She finished her ale and wondered why anyone would have an urgent errand to the Shielings, especially now. She fingered the dwindling assortment of coins in her purse. There would be ample time to enlist Jonas at the Swordsman's Guild in the morning before meeting their next boss at the second bell. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe for the latest episodes. I aim to have fresh chapters here weekly. And if you'd like to read ahead, check out the Runes of Ranudar on Royal Road. Royal Road is a platform for episodic fiction, and it is free for readers. If you enjoy fantasy, science fiction, lit RPG, and the like, Royal Road has plenty of fiction for you to discover. I hope to see you here again next week for our next episode.